Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Okay, close your eyes and imagine this. Okay, wait, unless you're driving, and then maybe only close one eye? Whatever, I don't care. You do you. All right, so you're having a conversation with friends, and somebody mentions an old acquaintance or family member, one who's been nearing the end of their life for a while now. The conversation takes a somber turn when they say, "I heard he finally passed." It feels like a natural way to speak about death, but it's still a little uncomfortable. And sometimes people use more casual or even slightly humorous expressions to lighten the mood. And this is where you might hear someone say, "They kicked the bucket."
Yeah.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, to kick the bucket means, quote, to die, end quote. And I just want to forewarn everyone that we're going to be probably irreverent or apathetic about the death of living entities during this episode. So if that kind of talk is not for you right now, perhaps check out our back catalog of over 300 episodes, most of which are not about death. Okay, Shauna, do you have any theories on why kicking a bucket might mean death?
Not a clue. I can make up something ridiculous. My brain's already trying to do that it has, I don't know, what if you tried to kick the bucket of a well, you just be falling right in that well and
Okay.
you're done. No, I don't have anything.
All right. Okay. Well, so I will say that there's the concept of a person hanging themselves by standing on a bucket and then kicking the bucket away.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I did find an example of that reported in the Oxford Journal, September 27th of 1788, reporting on the death of John Marshfield, a laboring man. I won't read it. It's a bit grotesque, but there is evidence of this happening and being reported on. And I found several newspapers of the early 1900s where someone would claim that this was the origin. But the Oxford English Dictionary does not seem to think it is the origin because they do not list kick the bucket under the definition of a bucket, as you and I are both probably thinking about it. So to understand this phrase, the first thing we need to do is understand that a bucket, in this case, is not the cylindrical vessel we might use to carry water like a pail or a pot, but instead a different, older meaning of bucket. Quote, a beam or yoke on which anything may be hung or carried, end quote. So a bucket can be many things. It can be that beam carried on your shoulders with 2 pails of water on either side as Jack and Jill came down the hill from the well, one of the presumably many times that they didn't fall all the way down. But all anyone hears about is that time that Jack fell and then Jill fell too, and it was probably rainy and slippery, and you should give these kids a break. The bucket is also the beams in a wooden frame used to slaughter animals. So you kill a hog, and then you hoist it onto this wooden frame. And I've seen some posit that the animal would buck around until it died, thus kicking the bucket. I don't know why you would hoist it up while it's alive and still fighting you rather than just killing it first, but I'm not going to argue with it because maybe there was like a good reason for it, like capturing the blood or something. I don't know, hashtag no waste. Anyway. This is the most commonly cited reason for the phrase in older dictionaries that were a little closer to the usage in the modern blogs about the word origins. So contemporaries for them, not so much modern for us. The things that we see today just spring up with no citations or sources of any kind. So the Oxford English Dictionary notes that kick the bucket is based off of bucket as in the wooden beams, not a bucket you might stand on.
Okay.
So there's that. Okay. And in most of the older stuff that I could see, it's specifically talking about, and we'll see some examples of it, but it's specifically talking about the thing that you would hang animals on while to butcher them to be able to, feed your family or the village or whatever.
Well, this is even more disturbing. I mean,
this is why I kind of gave that warning up ahead that we're going to talk about the death of living entities, not just humans. So yeah, it's pretty wild actually. But yes, so that is more likely where it came from. And I saw some things that make those claims. The stuff that makes the claims about, suicidal things is those are stuff that attribute the phrase to that are later. They're not, the earlier versions are all this thing about slaughtering animals.
Okay.
So Here's an example from Francis Gross's Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, the 1785 first edition. This is from the entry for kicks. Quote, to kick the bucket, to die. He kicked the bucket one day, he died one day. End quote. So vulgar in this case simply means that it's not something for high society. And this gives us compelling evidence that the phrase was in use by 1785, at least in the slang vernacular. But in the late 1700s, the phrase was already seeping into newspapers and magazines too, which means it almost certainly predates 1785 by likely many decades, if not even longer. So one example of this seeping into newspapers and magazines is from a poem called Eulogium on Rum, and it was shared by the American Museum in the February 17th, 1790 edition of the Gazette of the United States. Eulogium is a Middle Latin version of the word eulogy, which is an oral statement in honor of the deceased. So in this case, it's a recognition of honor for rum itself. So it's being used figuratively here. And rum, the alcoholic spirit. So the poem itself is cited as being written December of 1789. And here is one verse. Quote, and would our western brethren be less proud or, in other words, throw by the gun and drum, for ducks and squirrels save their lead and powder, and send the tawny rogues some pipes of rum. I dare predict they all would gladly suck it, and every mother's son soon kick the bucket. End quote.
Lovely.
I know, right? I love how they rhymed proud or with powder. Powder.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, okay, all right, drum and rum, good, suck it, bucket. All right.
Yeah.
It's very clever, you know, this Gazette of the United States. Thank you very much for that. But yes, so that was quite an interesting usage, but it was still being used in a slang way here, and you can get away with that sometimes more in sonnets and poems and those kinds of things than you might if you were writing a more serious article. But we are seeing it in newspapers in the late 1700s. So as I said, this gives us definite thoughts that it is likely, you know, predates this by quite a bit. Its usage not in the newspapers and stuff.
Right.
Here's one from Freemasons magazine from May 1794. This is out of London, UK, and it uses the phrase with the definition. Quote, and really, Mr. Editor, we are the wittiest people on earth. Everything serious and sacred is made a jest of. To come to an untimely end is only to go off at the drop, and to die in one's bed is to kick the bucket. End quote. That was from a piece called Thoughts on Modern Wit, signed yours, Propriety. I thought that was interesting because they're specifically saying in this one, he's using it as to die in one's bed is to kick the bucket.
Right.
That's the only time I ever see that specifically mentioned, is dying in your bed specifically.
Gotcha.
That. So those are two examples from the late 1700s of it being used in pieces that were, would have been read by higher society as well. So here's an example in a poem called Irregular Ode. It was written by John Edward Harwood, and it was published in the Kentucky Gazette out of USA, October 8th, 1811. The poem, as an explanation, from the author to his mistress after refusal. I'll pick up the last few lines of it. Quote, now whether I am fastidious or in fear, I want the heart to quit the scene of trouble. Hope gives a hint there is still something near, and like a child, I wish to grasp the bubble. She whispers too, I may not have better luck yet, so if you please, I will not kick the bucket. End quote.
Oh, okay.
A guy writing to his mistress after she has refused him.
Oh, you know.
So I think she broke it off, I guess. So I don't know that I feel terribly bad for him or anything, but here's another example. This is from 1871 in a English to German supplement or lexicon. And so this is a dictionary by Adalbert Hopp. Quote, kick the bucket. The allusion is to the way in which a slaughtered pig is hung up, that is to say, by passing the ends of a bent piece of wood behind the tendons of the hind legs, and so suspending it to a hook in a beam above. The piece of wood is locally termed a bucket, and so by a coarse metaphor, the phrase came to signify to die. End quote. So this is an example of a definition in the 1800s using kick the bucket and noting that it is used in the slaughtering of animals. Specifically, in this case, they're talking about a pig. And so it is being hooked into a beam above.
Okay.
Yeah. The 1900s were full of supposed origin stories for our phrase. And so in the behind the scenes video, available every Friday on our Patreon, we're going to explore 4 different supposed origin stories in a 30-year span in newspapers from the United States. None of them are true, but they are all very interesting. And this is why you can't just rely, you need to find things that are close to when the phrase was originated, or you're going to find lots of people making lots of claims with literally no one ever fact checking them. And so just this 30-year span is very interesting. But we're going to do that on our behind the scenes video, which is available every Friday on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. Next, we're going to jump into the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which happened February 14th of 1929 in Chicago, Illinois. And it's thought to have been the part of an ongoing gang war between the victims, the North Side Gang, and Al Capone's gang. This headline came less than a week later via the Seward Daily Getaway, which was out of Alaska, USA, on February 20th, 1929. It comes from the AP Newswire out of Chicago and has the headline, "Life of Coroner Threatened Due to Investigation." Quote, Coroner Herman Bundenson revealed that his life has been threatened twice during the past 3 days, to which he attributed to his activity in investigating the St. Valentine's Day massacre of 7 gangmen. Bundenson said he also received an anonymous telephone call in which he was told, "You will be the next to die if you don't watch out." He said he received an anonymous letter asking him how he would like to kick the bucket. End quote.
Wow.
Yeah. And sorry about my old-timey Chicago gangster accent. That definitely was more influenced by black and white movies than it was by anything that's real.
I was like, oh, is that how it sounded?
In my head, it is.
Nice.
I can never promise that what came out of my mouth is what you hear, and that being the same about what is in my head. But, I mean, still.
Yeah.
All right, so one more before the break. This is from December 22nd of 1945, and it's regarding the death the day before of General George Patton in Heidelberg, Germany. I was just in Heidelberg. You'll be forgiven for thinking this was a war-related death, given the timeline, but alas, as it is mentioned in the Washington Daily News out of Washington, D.C., USA, it is not. So here we are. Quote, George S. Patton spoke often of death. He said he hoped he could lead his troops through one great battle to victory, and then he'd add that he supposed he would die under fire at his moment of triumph. But death mocked him. Death rode with him in the luxury of a peacetime automobile. For such a man it was, as the general himself said, a hell of a way to kick the bucket. A grateful nation counts his triumphs, gives thanks for his integrity and leadership, but the irony of it, he lived by the sword and died by the highway. End quote.
Oh.
I'm not sure I would say Patton was a man of integrity, given the way he treated men with shell shock, his frequent violent outbursts, and his verbal abuse of all types of people. But I recognize that he was seen as a leader during World War II, and a war-weary public would be thankful for his service, and I think that two things can be true at the same time.
Certainly.
Up next, we have several modern uses to cover, and we'll get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons on Patreon, and it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. So give our weekly discussions and poll questions a try. And if you love the content and want more of it, we have some paid tiers too if you have a few dollars to spare each month and want to support the show.
We have new things every weekday on the feeds. In addition to the conversation about what movies, shows, books, and podcasts everyone is enjoying, and our weekly poll questions, we also have early access to the week's podcast, all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode, and our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all of the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts that didn't make it into the podcast feed.
We've also got original digital artwork every month made by me and direct access to talk with us. No nefarious social media algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe and JGP do every episode. and our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsey Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
Long Shot Kick the Bucket is a 1969 song by The Pioneers. Here's the chorus, quote, "Long shot, him kick the bucket. Long shot, kick the bucket," end quote. I found this analysis of the song posted on the website Sonic Hits. There's no author listed for the piece. Quote, "The Pioneer song, Long Shot Kick the Bucket, is a commentary on the unpredictability of life and the agony that comes with the losing in the world of horse racing. The lyrics describe the scene of a horse race at Caymanas Park, where Longshot is competing. The singer encourages Longshot to get up and compete in the first race, but ultimately, Longshot tragically kicks the bucket. The crowd reacts with great distress, wailing, and reeling, while the rest of the horses, Starbright, Combat, and Corazon, continue the race. The lyrics showcase the ups and downs of horse racing, where one moment a horse can be in the rear, but then suddenly takes the lead. This loss of Longshot not only represents a financial loss for the bettors, but also signifies the loss of hope and the realization that life is fragile and unpredictable. Through this song, the Pioneers are using horse racing as a metaphor for life, illustrating that even when we try our best, we never know what life has in store for us, and sometimes we fall short." End quote. Kick the Bucket and Swing the Cat, English Words and Phrases and Their Curious Origins, is a 1988 book by Alex Games. Here's the synopsis. Quote, "Kick the Bucket and Swing the Cat takes a humorous tour through the fascinating, sometimes tragic, and often surprising history of the English language and its etymology." End quote. 1988 version there, so I'm sure there's a couple of more up-to-date versions that are out there, but yeah, so if you are interested if you like this show, you may like that too, so you should check and see if your library has Kick the Bucket and Swing the Cat by Alex Games. Kick the Bucket is a song off the 1999 album Frankenstein Girls Will Seem Strangely Sexy by the band Mindless Self-Indulgence. Here's a part of the chorus that doesn't have any words that would be considered curse words in English. Quote, "I'm so desperate, I don't know the things that are the best. I'll kick the bucket, y'all." End quote.
Okay.
Yeah, everything about Mindless Self-Indulgence, the album Frankenstein Girls Will Seem Strangely Sexy, and the song itself is just a wild trip. So
Okay.
as with all of our stuff, you can go to bunnytrailspod.com and see the show notes, click on the link, or you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, and click on the link there and watch the video for this song. It is a wild ride. Kick the Bucket is a 2009 song off the album Hobo by Charlie Winston. Here are the opening lyrics. Quote, "If you say this is pop, to be singing to a tune with a rhythm like this, would it be so unpopular for a singer like me to be bringing up the fact that we're all going to go? Some people swear, they say they know, where for me it's a mystery. But whichever way you see it, you have to admit it and live it and live it. We all kick the bucket in the end, the end." End quote.
I mean, I guess everybody does it, but maybe not literally with the wooden.
Yeah, I don't think most people are tortured to death in the way that hogs are. Yeah, great point. Great point, Shauna. Thanks for the literal interpretation of our figurative phrase here. Well done.
just being clear.
Thanks. I'm glad we brought it back to animal death. So, all right, instead of a human death, but everybody does die.
That's true.
Okay.
So far, anyway.
So far. All right. 7 Ways to Lighten Your Life Before You Kick the Bucket by Walt Hopkins and George Simmons is a book published in 2015. Here's the synopsis. Quote, "A bucket list is a list of things to do before you die. The book is a guide to ways to live before you die. Whether you have a bucket list or not, the stories and insights in this book offer you 7 clear ways to lighten and enlighten your life before you kick the bucket." George Simmons and Walt Hopkins, international consultants in their mid-70s, have learned a lot about living well while getting older, and they generously and intimately share those learnings with men and women concerned about aging. End quote. Okay, maybe I should get this book. I am starting to, every day I get out of bed and I feel a little bit more like an old man. I'm not yet, but I am firmly in the middle of my life. I think I am middle aged now
Yeah.
because if you doubled my age, this is how I define middle age. I may have mentioned this on the show before, but if you double your age and you say, "Oh, yeah, that's a reasonable time. He lived a good life, a good long life. That's a reasonable time to die," then you are middle age. Whereas if you double the age and you're like, "Oh, he died young," you are not yet middle age. Or if you double the age and they're like, "Wow, he lived a really long time," then you're probably old.
Yeah, especially if they're like, that's not even possible, then you're definitely old.
Right, you're definitely old. He died at 180. What?
Sorry, if you're 90 and you don't know you're old, just keep living your life.
No, I do think, I
Keep
mean, there's a
doing you.
point that in which you hit a point at which you start measuring things by like, because you're like, like, how old are you? I'm 3.5, and at some
Mhm.
point you're just like, I'm 98 and 3/4,
Yeah, yeah.
So
You
like at
get
some
to
point they
count
start
those.
tagging that on again. And I think when you get to that point, you're allowed to call yourself young again if you wish.
Yeah, yeah.
Wherever that is, probably somewhere in the 90s though. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you can like even count each month when you're like, you're like, I'm 101 and 11 months. Sure, I'll
Right.
take it.
And 11 and like 10/12ths. And it's like, okay, nope, I'm going to say 10/12ths so you don't have to do the math to reduce the fraction and then
Okay.
unreduce it and figure out that I meant October.
Oh my gosh.
Kick the Bucket, a Lainey Lovett mystery, is a 2018 book by Judith Arnold. It's the fourth of 5 books in the series. All of the books are plays on the term kicking. Here's the synopsis of this one. Quote, "Summertime, and the living should be easy. School's out, and 4th grade teacher Lainey Lovett is on vacation, spending her mornings running sports clinics for children and her evenings playing with the Rockettes, her recreation league soccer team. But things get a whole lot less easy when one of Lainey's teammates urges her to visit Sunrise Village, an assisted living residence for the elderly, where various items have gone missing: a ring, a jewelry box, a bottle of prescription medicine, and George Vanderkloop's considerable fortune, which he'd kept stuffed inside his mattress and which disappeared the night he died. Plenty of people at Sunrise Village had access to his apartment: his neighbors, the staff, his relatives, and the newly hired director of maintenance, who may just be the long-lost son of the Rockettes' distinctly unmotherly coach. Who stole George's money? And if he didn't die of natural causes, who killed him? Lainey doesn't need another mystery to solve, but Sunrise Village needs Lainey. The place teems with romantic intrigue, rivalries, gossip, raptures over the dining room chocolate cake, and possible crimes. Lainey will do her best to uncover the truth, but will she still be among the living when the assisted living establishment is done with her? End quote. Okay, that took a couple of turns.
Yeah, that's some stuff going on there.
What to Do If I Kick the Bucket? A Guide for My Next of Kin is a 2019 book written by Y.L. Owens. It's a fill-in-the-blank guide for someone to use after the death of a loved one. Here is the lengthy synopsis. Quote, "We all kick the bucket. Some of us kick it so unexpectedly our social media accounts and the online store listings and auctions hang out there in the wind until someone finally figures it out, if they do at all. Our Facebook account is frozen in time because of a long-forgotten password not written down since early 2009. Very few people have actual wills or advance directives, and even if you do have these important items, it's unlikely your daily to-do things are conveniently listed somewhere for a loved one to take care of sooner rather than months later. And does your designated agent, your spouse, your kid, cousin, best friend, know where you keep your will, not to mention the key to the side gate? This is your chance to put your daily doings all in one fabulous place, as well as your personal 2 cents into the planning of that fabulous celebration your loved ones will throw in honor of a life well lived. It's an emotional time for all, and a roadmap from you makes it much easier. If you've lost 5 or 10 minutes of sleep wondering who would think to look for your streaming subscriptions and cancel them ASAP, or your Amazon Prime account with that upcoming renewal date and automatic debit charge, this book is for you and them. Included is a section for some family history, your favorite memories, and those stories from cherished relatives that are starting to fade. Once those tidbits in time are gone, trust me, they're gone. Write everything down and tuck it away. There are people who will be grateful you did. It's not on a locked computer with a password no one knows in a file some internet troll might hack. Once it's done, take a deep breath and get on with your amazing, incredible life." End quote.
Okay.
That was very long, but I mean, I could definitely see how this would be helpful, even if you have a will or advance directives in place. I know both of us do, but I mean, still something like this could be very helpful for all those other things, you know?
Yeah, for sure. The things people aren't thinking about getting ready for, that eventuality.
Right. Well, in a previous life, I held a job where death was an all too common occurrence. And in the moment, it's best to be direct. Your loved one is dead. But as we get further removed from the event, though, some people find levity to be helpful. Talking about it being 10 years ago today that Grandpa died might be the opportunity to be respectful, but also a little humorous. And that's where this phrase really thrives. So I don't use it very often, but I do like having alternate ways to describe death. Kick the bucket is good, but I also like pushing up daisies, which we did in episode 3, bite the dust, which we did in episode 75, and give up the ghost, which we did in episode 196. Some phrases that we haven't covered are bought the farm, shuffled their mortal coil, taking a dirt nap, joined the invisible choir, and swims with the fishes. But my two favorite ones are circled the drain and bounced out like a bad check.
Oh, jeez.
So good.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I loved it. I love it. I mean, most of you listening have no idea what a bad check is, so that's fine. But for those of you, who were born before 1980-ish, you will appreciate that one. All right. As that 1794 piece said, everything serious and sacred is made a jest of. That's about all the time we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop cultural references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, what do you call the lace-up footwear used for working out? We've heard many names for them, like sneakers, tennis shoes, running shoes, trainers, and gym shoes. Emily says, quote, where I grew up in Illinois, I heard the term gym shoes because they were the shoes you'd change into for gym class. I call them sneakers now, end quote. Mary adds, quote, I grew up calling them tennis shoes, but now call them gym shoes. Occasionally, I will call them sneakers because it is just a fun word to say. I'll never call them running shoes because, as I like to remind people often, running is the greatest thing ever unless you compare it to not running, end quote.
Fair point. Cheryl says, quote, runners actually, so running shoes was the closest, end quote. Jenna adds, quote, I'm in Northern Ireland, and we've always said trainers. Runners is fairly common in Ireland too, end quote. I grew up in Dallas, Texas area. I always heard them called tennis shoes, and on rare occasions, sneakers. I was an adult before I heard anyone say the other names, but I've pretty much heard them all now, which I guess makes sense as I'd only been to a handful of places growing up, and most of them were exactly like the people and places I grew up with. So not a lot of diversity for young Dan. And so I just didn't hear a lot of different ways to say it. But yeah, now I've heard all of those, and including trainers, which I think is more common in some other parts of the world, but definitely have still heard them called that too.
JGP says, quote, I'd call them sneakers generally speaking. I guess if the context was that someone had a pair they'd bought specifically for running or tennis, then I might call them tennis shoes or running shoes. Or if the pair was just for gym class, then they might be gym shoes. But I've only seen these kind of shoes referred to as trainers in linguistic surveys or polls like this, and would never call them that, end quote.
Yeah, that's fair. That's how I felt about it too. I'm like, I don't think I'd call them that, but fair.
Yeah, so I was in a lot of sports in school. Sometimes there were shoes specific to the sport, like cheer shoes or cleats or basketball shoes, spikes, court shoes, tennis shoes.
It's going to be a Forrest Gump bit.
Yeah,
like
much.
Boiled shrimp, fried shrimp.
But for like the general term, gym shoes, athletic shoes, runners, trainers, those are all the same in my mind. And then sneakers could refer to athletic shoes, but more frequently that meant like Converse style shoes.
How interesting.
Yeah. If you want to take part in our silly polls, head over to the Patreon. We'd love to hear your take on our weekly poll questions, and it's free at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
words belong to their users.